Welcome to The Locker Room, the podcast that delivers practical coaching advice you can implement today. Whether you're a coach, instructor, or educator, we bring you real stories and actionable tips from experts in the field. Each episode explores key lessons from their careers to help you elevate your own coaching. We always wrap up by asking, if you could go back to your first day as a coach, what advice would you give yourself? Let's dive in. In this episode, we talk to Matt Jones. He has been a performance coach for 12 years. He has experience working with Olympic athletes, international footballers, all the way down to general population. He's an accredited strength and conditioning coach with the NSCA. He has a master's in performance coaching and a bachelor's in sports studies. It's an interesting chat. We go from everything had to deal with like Olympic level scheduling, down to what advice he would give himself in terms of shaping his head. So no, it's a great chat, and let's meet Matt. Hey Matt, how are you?
Hey Steve, how's things, mate? Cheers for having me on.
Yeah, no worries, thank you. So I just, obviously we saw your bio there. There's lots that we could get into, and I'm sure we're not going to touch on everything today, but I just got a few questions that we could hopefully get your take on, and then that could help some people out that are listening and help them with their own coaching. So you've worked as a performance coach in everything from like football to swimming with Olympic athletes to regular folk. What are some, like, I guess, maybe surprising lessons you've learned that can help with kind of everyone you come across?
Yeah. I suppose the biggest threat, and I suppose it doesn't necessarily have to even be with sport, it can be whoever you're working with. I suppose that the maximizing development, maximizing performance, it comes down to everything has to be right for the individual. Does that make sense? So how everything is working from the psychologically. So how safe they feel in the environment, what their mindset is, and the connections they have to the coaches and the peers, their own mindset and temperament for training, their own drive and determination, and sort of how that fits in. I suppose socially on that side of things, the sense of community they feel within their training environment they're in as well. Their other, I suppose, life stresses, things like financial security, previous experiences, family environment, that all of this like really ties into how we develop individuals, really, not even athletes but individuals across sport. I suppose even then on the more to the training environment side of things as well, just the training methodology, how that fits with the individual, with their own beliefs, their own experiences before that, equipment available, and take the impact, coaching quality, which is always hopefully good enough, but coaching quality, their own sense of autonomy in the program as well, how much say they have about what's going on their own programming. I suppose it's so multifactorial. There's so many things going on that really, I suppose when you look at coaching from just an outside lens, think, okay, it's easy, you're telling someone just what to do, but there's so many factors that go into it, and it has to be this perfect storm, especially in elite level sport, and I suppose for world-class development that most people are trying to work towards anyway. And it's, I suppose, one of those reasons why we see so many like child prodigies really never be able to make it to elite level. They'll break through because they've had some form of advantage, but something catches up at some point, I suppose.
That's interesting. So when you say you get a task with a new job, and you're going to say it's in some sort of Olympic facility, and you're now in charge as the coach, when you're setting up to meet them for the first time, or when you start setting up a program, are there like certain do you have certain things that you make them fill out, that you get this information off of them, or do you let it build over time, or if you had a process, do you have anything that you...
I'm quite ad hoc with it. I suppose that's the way I am naturally. I just try and have a laugh and a joke, and I always find that trying to make someone laugh makes that connection and that level of communication easier. And then I suppose just questioning for understanding, really, and especially working with people one-to-one at the minute, it's okay, what have you done before? What's led you to this point? How have you decided to seek me out to maximize your performance now? What's gone on, and what do you think's missing? And then just going from there. And I suppose on that, like storytelling such a good aspect of that, and probably an underrated aspect is, asking people questions so they can tell a story, or you telling a story based on something they've said, because there's always so many threads that you can make a connection with an individual. They might just mention one word or something, and it might tie into so many other things, and I suppose that's trying to find out about them and their story. I suppose the question is, there's nothing formal though. I've never done anything really formal on that front, but yeah.
Nice, good. So it's always I guess it's the same. I always think about it at my end as well. Like, it's just relationship building, isn't it?
Yeah,
like we deal a lot with people that can be quite fearful in like a fearful environment, and then if you don't have a strong relationship there, it quickly breaks down that trust.
Yeah.
So you've worked a lot in internationally as well. How do you find that in terms of with language? If there's different languages, have you always had translators, or like how have you navigated that internationally in terms of building relationships?
Yeah, I suppose speaking English as the main language is just shouting louder and pointing harder, isn't it? But,
exactly.
But no, I mean, it was a massive challenge. Singapore wasn't so bad when I worked over there, because they all spoke English. They didn't speak Welsh English. They didn't speak that. That's the big challenge. But China was a lot tougher. I did have a translator after 3 months, which made life a bit easier. But yeah, I suppose it's understanding the frame of reference, and that was the biggest challenge to overcome, because how we relate to things and how I suppose everyone tends to grow up in the UK, roughly they have the same similar experiences for the most part on the basic level, and you can make jokes and make points of reference to that stuff, but in other countries it's completely different, and what they've gone through to us is always a big challenge. So I find it quite hard sometimes just to find things that are relatable between, I suppose it comes back to storytelling after, but and getting to know the individual. But, it is hard, and I suppose it's just really trying to take it slow. And especially for me, I'm fairly excitable as a coach, and, I try and bring that energy a little tiny bit. And I remember one of my first group sessions in Singapore. It was with like the women's and the 19s national team, I think football national team. And I was very deliberate, very clear. Okay, right, this is what we're going to do now. We're going to do this for X reps, for X sets, etc., etc. And it was all going really well. I remember we got to the end, and I was like, right, okay, everyone, let's get down on the floor. We're getting a pressing position. We're going to do some mobility to finish. And I just remember getting down, looking up, and everyone was just like, what? Just no idea, straight ahead. So like that's, that it is hard, and especially when you get into the habit of just doing the same thing. The one, strangely, in Singapore, they've got this massive obsession with Mr. Bean.
Right, nice.
And I know this is like probably a left turn, never expected to go this way, but actually, like, he was actually fairly big influence off the back of that, because they literally got like Mr. Bean cafes out in Singapore.
Yeah.
And they love it. Absolutely love it. And I suppose when I reflected on it, I was like, well, why? Well, there's no language, all slapstick, all physical comedy. I'm like, okay, well, how can I take those traits and apply it to my coaching and have that buy-in and have that level of communication about if they can't understand me and what I'm saying, especially not in China. My Mandarin was absolutely awful. It was a case of 10 phrases just going for it. But yeah, it was that, like, can I be over the top and really overemphasize certain things? If someone athlete did something wrong, like really over exaggerate what they did, or even just, can I bring a sense of humor with just proximity? Can I be there next to them just to make them laugh and to build that connection?
Yeah. That's very interesting. I often use the analogy of like dog training, for example. So I can't speak to a dog, but like dogs can do incredibly like difficult tasks, and that they've learned, and it's a learned skill. So like, we always talk about like, so that you just got to be very clear with the outcome, right? And like a controlled environment. And as long as they know what the outcome is roughly, then you can guide someone some way. But that's funny you say that about Mr. Bean. I had heard that before. They were talking about slapstick comedy and how it's huge because there's no language. But like exactly what you said, the story, everyone can still follow the story.
That was it. I mean, they were like, when I left China, they gave me like they got me like a trophy, like an Oscars trophy with best actor. on it.
Oh,
Just
nice.
no present.
Oh, that's cool.
They found it like quite funny how I coach. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's wicked. So when you were in Beijing, you worked in university and you had the chance to, I think, teach like new coaches, right? Upcoming
Yep.
coaches.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are some things like when you are kind of mentoring new coaches? Are there some things you find yourself mentioning more than once, or different references to books or podcasts or things that you help to get them started?
Yeah. I suppose it's having a model, like a mental model to organize your thought. That's always been, I don't know whether I'm naturally just like that anyway. Like my missus absolutely hates it because all I talk about is systems. Now there's a system
Yeah.
for this, for drying up.
Yeah.
Just do this. Come on, let make sense.
Yeah.
There's logic behind it. So there's always like trying to have that system or mental model in place for coaching. Just because it helps organize your thoughts, helps put things into categories so you're not overwhelmed, I suppose. Like that's always the way I've sort of tended to think about things. I mean, even like goes back to how I think about training, the components of training. Go back to, I don't know if you remember, do GCSE
I didn't actually. No, I didn't.
Yeah. So there's the principles of training is the I don't know the words for it now, but SPORT, so it's sport. So specificity, progression, overload, reversibility, and time or tedium. But I use that consistently, even now, how I think about what I'm doing with training. So, for specificity, like I use a hammer thrower who's a coach for shot put and hammer called Anatoly Bondarchuk, who's a Russian guy. I think he won a gold and a bronze in the Olympics. He's coached multiple gold medals, but he has a classification of exercise. So how you break down the sport instruction and where exercises should fit and based on how they impact training or impact your performance. Like competition exercise, special development exercises, special preparatory exercises, and general exercises. So that helps me figure out, well, actually what's going to make the boat go faster, pretty much. That's how I use that. Progression, my organizing of exercises, where someone comes in, where they start, and how I can build them up or even pull them back if needs be because of injuries. Overload. So, setting rep schemes, periodization, all of those mental models within that. And that's how I look at how we progress over time. Reversibility, I suppose, is residual effects. That's from popularized by a guy called Isserin, and basically lets you know roughly how long certain physical characteristics decay. If you don't train them, it takes some are really short, like 5 days, some are a lot longer, like 30 days, 35 days, something like that. So that helps me understand where or how often I need to train those qualities. I mean, that was actually from a swim coach initially called Doc Councilman, I think his name was. But that's where Isserin got it from. But yeah, so like figuring out and understanding that. And then obviously time is adaptation rates. How long does it take things to adapt? How long on the opposite side of the coin to how long does it take things to decay? So for me, teaching new coaches or people coming through, it's okay, well, look, this is my mental model that I use. This is how I organize my thoughts and where things fit in. And these are the first principles of training. You have to understand these before you can really go into anything more detailed, ultimately.
I see. And then do you use that then, like taking a step back, looking at that, then you'll, I guess, time horizon wise, you can then allocate priority to when you need to do different things. Is that how you?
Yeah, I suppose it's more of like that's the lens I look through before I organize trainings. I'll have a look at that specificity. Okay, what are the things actually going to be important? Okay, well, what are the progressions or regressions of that? Okay, how can I then apply that through the periodization that we're using? Okay, well, how often do I need to use those before I lose them? And then obviously, how long will it take me to reach the point I want to reach? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So it's almost like you choose something and then wash it through each stage.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, really cool. I was talking about this with a friend of mine the other day. We have it's from Kolb's experiential learning model, actually. What we use in the British Association is a thing called TIED, so TIED. So it's like task, information, evaluation, development, and it's just a cycle. It's quite easy because it can be applied to like a seasonal long program, but then it can also be applied to an activity, like a warm-up activity.
Yeah,
And it's just one of those that's the model. The model's only as good as the things you place into that model, right? And so I think it's one of those ones where I always think that the best coaches I know have a deep and wide breadth of knowledge that they can pull from to put into the model, like the mod. Yeah, that's interesting. Is there anything that you learned early on that you've changed your mind on? This is a bit of a question I always think of this. Or is there something that someone told you early on that's just stuck with you and you've managed to use it in different scenarios?
I mean, I suppose something changed. Everything, absolutely everything. But yeah, I mean, I've been coaching since 20, S&C coaching and performance coaching since 2012. So I placed much more emphasis on strengths and strength side of things for most athletes, if not all athletes, for a large part of that 12 years, and probably the last 2 or 3, somewhere around about there, I've really gone away from that. Okay, well, look, there's a bare minimum threshold we need to hit. After that, especially for field sport athletes and athletes like playing football or, or rugby or anything like that, it's more about speed and more about perception, action, coupling, and agility side of things, and get through the cycle and stuff like that, and just having that strength is right. That's will just chip away. Like to me now, and not even now, it's always been the case, I suppose, but strength's like falling out of a boat and hitting water. Anyone can do it. You go down a gym, there's some idiot there who's lifting weights with the worst technique possible, but they're probably lifting 50, 60 kilos heavier than me comfortably. And it's like, that's easy. And that shouldn't be there's a barrier for entry, I suppose, but after that point, it doesn't matter, and as long as we're working on things actually going to move the needle, or like I said before, make the boat go faster, that's really what I'd focus on now. And that's what I changed my mind on a lot. I'd really step away from all of that and dive deeper into the speed side of things as an example.
I remember I was reading this, I forget when it was, within the last year, there's an article, I think it was when Federer was retiring and all that stuff, and it was talking about the top 50 in tennis. There's a very similar one, when it comes to just technique wise and just pure technique, stripping it away from the game, they're almost the same, into ball speed, head, all this sort of stuff. But then how is it that the top 5 are the top 5 consistently over the last X amount of years? So when you have worked with the elite, okay, I'll put that in quotes, what makes the elite elite? That's always a question that floats around coaching circles. What do you think?
It's in my opinion, it is just flawless execution of the basics of the technical aspect of the sport. As an example, the speed climbers I worked with in China, we had one girl who was physically absolutely amazing, picked up all running mechanic drills. I've got a video on my phone of these 2 athletes. This one who was physically just amazing, just picked up everything. She was 59 kilos doing pull-ups with 50 kg off the top of my head. She could, Bulgarian split squat, rear elevated split squat, 90 kg for 4 reps, quarter squat, 160, absolute animal. Not big girl, not big or stocky, just physically amazing. We had a girl then who couldn't do a box jump onto a box this high. But this girl could climb faster than her.
Right.
And it's there's a technical model for climbing, but it's always for speed climbing, it's always the same route. So she was just so more technically developed than this other girl who was physically dominant. She could beat her in a race, but she couldn't jump onto a box or nothing like that. So when you going into, there's a lovely picture of it's by I'm testing myself Yuri Verkhoshansky. So there's a book called Special Strength Training Manual for Coaches, and he's got this this figure in it, and it's basically power output of sport in action or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head now, but basically that's defined underneath that. So before you get to that is the technical execution, and then below that is then strength and power. So you can have all the strength and power in the world, but if you haven't got that technical ability, you're not going to have a maximal power output in your competition exercise, basically. So like this girl was absolutely dreadful physically, but she was physically good enough that she could execute her technical aspects good enough to have a better power output.
I see.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
You got enough to hit the next level, then that's enough. There's no point staying at the bottom and being the best you can at the bottom level, sort of thing. I understand. I understand.
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest thing, is that just they do the basics so much better than everybody else. And and that could be in different positions, I suppose. Like, if we go out to tennis, like, that could be those top 5 guys. They can just always hit the ball however they want to hit it perfectly well, whatever position they're in. Whereas people who aren't in the top 5, the athletes who aren't in the top 5, maybe it's just to the very edge of their technical ability, and that's where we're not stable in terms of technical ability, if that makes sense.
Because you hear a lot of people talk about, like, it's obviously in the ski world, but they talk about the love for it and the love for the game. And it's like, well, the love for it means that you will do all of the boring stuff, essentially, like the non-sexy stuff. So it's like, if you love it, then you just enjoy doing all aspects of it, not just the flashy stuff. There was, I forget the boxer's name. Is it Terence Crawford? Anyway, but he, does incredible combos. And a young boxer said to him, like, I've been trying to learn your, like, whatever, 8 or 9 punch combos. Like, nope, just learn to jab first. Just get your jab perfect, and then move on to the thing. And it's like, he's like, 8 is just set up from 1 to 2 to 3. It's like, it's just don't look at the flash side of it.
Absolutely. It's the saying, like, learn the rules before you break the rules, right? Like, they have to learn those basics and learn it to a level that you can break them. If that makes sense, like, especially when we take sprint to performance, like a track and field sprint to performance, and try and implement that within team sport, which is a much more chaotic environment. They have to have, in my mind, they have to have an understanding of the rules and be amazing at that basic technical ability, and then we can play around, and then we can do that rest of the other stuff, the same way, I suppose, with the combos and the boxing. You have to know how to do those basics.
I was just talking with someone today, actually. We were talking about how you have to have, like, creativity in sport. There was an article that came out. It came out that creativity comes from skills, like being, like, exactly what you said, flawless skills. And then once you've got that, that's where it looks like the creativity comes from. So, like, in my example is, I think of ski racing, like, there's X amount of distance between the gates, and your equipment has a certain distance to it, like, in meterage. So it's like, if you fully understand and get to grips with your equipment, and exactly what you can do with that equipment, then it looks like you can be free and be, like, artistic with it. But it's because you have such a you've drilled it so much, exactly. It's like it's just an extension of yourself, right? Back to tennis, it's like the same sort of thing. Amazing. So again, you've helped athletes through obviously intense performance environments. So how do you keep athletes motivated when they hit a plateau or start to lose confidence in their progress? So I can imagine this, like, I know athletes that have been in, like, Olympic cycles. So just having that time of, like, 4 years or 3 years or 2, like, just the countdown can apply such pressure. Like, how do you keep, if people are hitting plateaus or losing confidence in what they're doing?
I suppose it's having that plan in place, and I suppose as long as you've developed enough trust with an athlete, they'll buy into the process, and it doesn't really matter if you're seeing a plateau. Again, it depends on where it is within that cycle and the proximity of competition. Some athletes can just be a confidence thing, and they're not seeing that, and it's finding ways, I suppose, to show them, look, we're still developing. I suppose going back to the, like, categorization of exercises, that competition exercise, your special development, special preparatory. Like, it might be a case of figuring out measurables for those. And, like, as an example, like in the gym-based environment, using velocity-based training, we measure the speed that I lift in the bar. Now, that could be a case that I'm just very clever in terms of adjusting the weights that you're using, or adjusting the range of movement, so it gives them, like, a false peak. So, look, you've had an improvement in this. Look, it's gone up this week, and we do that over a couple of weeks. And the athlete might not see a major increase in their competition exercise, but seeing that peak in the other exercises that might not necessarily transfer
Yeah.
to them. They might think, oh, actually, okay, I can train a bit harder because, yeah, I'm feeling good. Look, my numbers are going up here. And that might give them that sense of, oh, actually, yeah. And that might be enough. You know, it's...
I see.
It's a difficult one, though, you know, and I think as long as you have that trust with them and they trust you to have the best interests at heart and you're doing the right thing, you can get over that. It's just one of those things. And I suppose assessing the other factors that come into it, there's other stresses and what can you take off the plate, really.
Yeah.
You know?
We have it a bit like we train. So in the system that we talk about in skiing, there's 4 levels to it, and you kind of get your 1 and 2, and then you normally work within a ski school then. And then whilst you're in a ski school, you can do your level 3, and then you tend to been in it for a couple of years, that sort of thing. And then you go up to level 4. And so we train a lot of people through the level 3 and 4. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, like when you're always learning, you're always in that kind of where the too far out your comfort zone is horribly like anxiety inducing, but too far in it, you don't learn anything. So if you're always teetering on the edge, that's what you're doing. You're always teetering on the edge. So, and it's if you're always doing that, you sometimes need to take a step back and look even back a year. It's like, well, hang on, the stuff you're doing now is far beyond what you were doing, but you still feel like you're not progressing because you're still, do you know what I mean? Am I making that clear? Like, that's what you're always teetering with being successful and not successful. If you're always in that place, it's very hard to, unless you do take a step back and look at it, like you said, unless you've got a strong plan that with actual numbers that people can see some progression. Like we talk about it with just into like even just with people on holiday, you know, you'll ski with them a little bit and you'll put them on some terrain. You just pop them back onto the like one run lower than what they're at, and then even that could be enough that makes them think, oh yeah, actually, I've got a little something about me. And it's like, there you are. And it's just that people get so swept up in wanting to be better and better and better. They don't realize sometimes how far they've come.
Yeah, definitely.
This is just a curious one on my part. So now obviously you've been in this world, like you said, for a long time. When you are doing something for yourself, like say you pick up a new sport or you're in the gym, like I imagine you're quite hard on yourself, but what have you taken that you do with other people that you've actually implemented into your own stuff?
I'm definitely not hard on myself, man. The SSC coach are the laziest people in the world. You either go one of 2 ends of the spectrum. You're either really like mad on it, or you just like, I'll give it a miss today. I'll sit down and eat a pack of biscuits like I did this morning. I don't know. I suppose like I started playing football again this season for the first time in 6.5 years. And I mean, I'm realizing that being 34 and doing that is a lot harder than it was at 24. Physically, definitely. So no, like I completely sort of revamped my training. I've started training like I trained someone who was a field sport athlete, you know, and I've just stripped it back. I'm like, okay, well, look, as much as I'd love to get some heavy weights in, I'm gassed there. Do you know what I mean? I can't handle this much volume at the minute. So it's, just, I try to take my own advice, which was the hardest part as a coach in it. But I mean, even then myself, like I pay for someone to do my training because I know that if I planned it, I wouldn't do it. And having that coach there, not that it's anything majorly detailed, but it's just some form of structure for me that I know that, right, I've got these 4 sessions to get in this week, or I'll get it done. It's there, I'm paying for it, I'll do it, you know. And I think that's a big help, to be honest, you know, and taking that little tiny bit off my plate. But I mean, I've got a toddler, I don't have time for other hobbies, to be fair. That's a couple hours on a Saturday I get free, mate, you know.
Nice. Perfect. So then, last question to sum up, like if you could go back to your first day, then if you meet Matt on kind of after all the uni stuff and everything, he's walking into his first day as a coach, as you're his mentor, like what would you say, or what advice would you give yourself?
Shave your head sooner. You were balding 2 years ago. No, I suppose. I think there's like four things, I suppose, when I think about it. I suppose it applies to anyone, really, doesn't it? But I suppose first off, it's being a coach. You're a coach. That's what you do. You're not the niche that you work in. You're not like You're not an S&C, you're not strength and conditioning, you're not performance coach, you're a coach. That's it, and work on your ability to coach anybody and everybody, and challenge yourself by putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. And I suppose that, to be fair, that's what I've always done anyway. I've always found, right, okay, let's, as an example, moving to Singapore, I just sort of do it. And if it goes to shit, then fine, it goes to shit, I'll just fly home. Like, it is what it is. But try it, put yourself in those comfortable positions. And I mean, I suppose this was still whilst I was at uni, but I mean, as an example, like one of my biggest coaching development sort of periods was I was trying to coach field hockey in Pontypridd to a group of 8 and 9-year-olds on concrete over winter. And like, that was just, man, like, I tell you what, like, that was a slog, those sort of few months, whatever it was I did it. But, that, and they didn't want to be there either. But, like that really, like, just found, okay, well, like, if I can do this, then whatever is, it was hard, and I'm not a field hockey coach, but like, if I can do this, it's fine. I can do anything really in terms of coaching. So like, I always found that was a big area of development for me. I suppose then, like, reflecting on my practice as well. What did I do well? What were my interactions like? How was I cueing? What was requests for feedback, or what was the feedback like from the athletes or individuals I worked with? What do I need to work on? Can I evaluate it? Can I come up with an action plan off the back of that then, and trying to implement some positive change, just so that at least my next session I do is better than my last session, or that next interaction is better than my last interaction. I suppose that's for the coaching side, I guess. Learning every day, read as broadly as possible and find those links between other fields and what you do on a daily basis. I mean, there's one area of my philosophy, like my coach philosophy, is called exaptation. Exaptation is the biological process of things that are being used for what they weren't initially used for, or radically repurposing. Is the thing. I won't dive into the background of that, but the development of feathers for flight and stuff like that is one area of it. But like, I always think about that as, okay, well, when I read a book or read something, okay, that's interesting. Okay, how can I use that in my practice? Or how can I use that in my planning? Or how can I use that in my interactions? Or, can I take it from elsewhere? Or other, especially coaching's a fairly young profession, especially S&C and strength and conditioning. It's a fairly young profession. Realistically, we're talking like 50 years old. Like, management side of things, well, there's been management for thousands of years. Well, that's much more developed as a I suppose industry, I guess, than coaching is anyway. So, okay, what can I take from there, and how can I apply aspects of that? That's something I thought about. I suppose then next, find a mentor or peers that challenge you. That's challenge you and your practice. That was, I've not necessarily had a one-to-one mentor anyway. I've just sort of, because I've been here, there, and everywhere. I use that reading. I do a ton of education. Luckily, I've been very lucky to have very good colleagues around me who've challenged me, and COVID was excellent for it. We had tons of free time to actually sit down and chat through things on a regular basis, which I was thinking, I don't get that free time anymore. And I suppose, having those people around you that, you can ask questions on a daily basis, and they can bounce ideas off, and, you provide feedback to their ideas and things like that. I think that's such a massive area that's probably underutilized, really. But yeah, that would be something, I think. And I suppose finally, like, participate, I think. Do what you coach. I mean, it makes, as I just said, I'm doing hardly any lifting, but I mean, if I've done enough, I suppose, over the past 20 years of my life. The same for you skiing, right? Like, you get to understand, it's harder, I suppose, than relating to the beginners, but you get to understand the sort of common threads that pop up, of like, okay, well, if I change this and do this, this is the outcome. Okay, if we modify this, okay, this is the outcome. I mean, you get those reps in when you're coaching anyway, don't you? But it helps. It helps, especially starting off. I think, if you, as an example, if you're a strength and conditioning coach, performance coach, lift weights, sprint, jump, do the things you're asking athletes to do, so you can coach it better. And I suppose that allows you then to find that the language that's required, or at least trying to find the language that's required anyway to solve the problem that's in front of you.
No, that's awesome. So a couple of things you said there, I put down here, reflect and underlined it, and then you came on to mentorship. How much reflection do you do in terms of self-reflection, and then how much of it do you do where you bounce it off mentors and colleagues and things like that?
Probably not enough, is the honest answer. But I suppose it's more, for me, it's more in the moment, like, as an example, I was working with someone one-to-one this morning, doing some speed coaching with them. And there was something I identified when we were recording, taking video, okay. And then it's like, right, okay, well, try this now. Okay, when this is my coaching and then they do it, and it wasn't really what I wanted. So it's a case of, okay, well, actually, what's the language I used? Okay, is this, as an example, like one of the things was, all right, I want your torso angle the same as your shin angle when you're accelerating. And Cara, he did a rep, and I was like, what was that? It was rubbish. I was like, make sure that torso's there. And he's like, what's your torso? And I'm like, hey, right, that's on me. Okay, now, and it's just, it's a lot more in the moment. I don't really, again, I don't have the time, but I probably don't have the time, but I don't have the time to really sit down and think, right, today, what could I have done better? I've never really done that anyway. It's more in the moment and just figuring out solutions. Then I probably think back about probably interactions with managers and stuff in the past that I shouldn't have done. Shouldn't have said that, but like that is what it is. But
but I always think that like mentorship is a big thing that we're talking about at the moment, and it just made me think back. And also doing this as well now, it makes me think back over my own career, and I've never really thought of them as mentors at the time that they were mentoring me. I was just like, oh, it's just my mate. And then actually looking back, it's like, oh yeah, I got so much from them, but it was never, I never felt like a mentor-mentee relationship. It was just like, we were just hanging out, skiing. That's why this thing is called the locker room, because it's just chat that you have in the locker room, right? After your day, you're like, oh, I tried this today, didn't really work. And then they're like, well, actually, maybe think about doing it this way, that sort of casual, like you mentioned at the start, that casualness, like almost, it makes it okay to then fail. If you have like a casual relationship in terms of you trust the person you're talking to, you feel okay to say where maybe you've messed up. Your first point when it comes to, you said be a coach, like don't be the niche or don't be the thing. What do you mean by that? If you go a bit deeper on that.
So I think realistically, if you're a coach, you should be able to go into any environment, any sport, and coach. Like my fiance is a teacher. She's earlier specialist. She'll chat to me about teaching. And I'm like, okay, well, look, this is how. Okay, was it because of this, or on this how I broach X, Y, Z? And I can relate to that because there's similar principles involved. And I think it's the same. Then if I go in, as an example, coach field hockey to kids in Pontypridd in winter, right, on concrete, it shouldn't matter. Like the same basic principles carry across, in my opinion. So, maybe you absolutely love, as an example, in S&C in performance coaching, maybe you love lifting weights and you're brilliant at that. Okay, well, all right, can you go and apply those same basic principles of coaching and trying to get people to do the same thing in a different sport where you're uncomfortable? Okay, you find that basic understanding what you need to do, but can you still have the same positive impact? And I think that's probably something that more people as a developing should do more of. Like I coached multiple sports. I coached football, I coached rugby, did a bit of athletics, did swimming and swimming teaching, and trying to get 4 or 5-year-olds to swim on their back in a pool when the parents are just 5 meters, Malvin's like class, and I was like, come on, kick your legs, come on, like try it, finding ways to test yourself on that front. And I suppose that's what I mean by being a coach. It's just like apply those principles, and if you are good, you can, in my opinion, you can go to any environment and apply those. Like I think if I went to a school now, and I could probably build relationships with people and kids because it's the same, right? It's asking for stories, and I think that's sort of what I mean by it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was. I just want to kind of make sure. And one thing I thought of when you said it is something I think a lot about as well is I went and worked with youth mogul teams in Australia. So I was never an athlete as a kid or in any sport.
Right,
really.
You're a good one. Tennis, come on.
Bit of tennis, bit of basketball. athlete is strong.
Okay.
I was just taller than the others, but and so I never came from that sort of background. And I remember like a lot of the other coaches we worked with, they kind of did it 50-50, where they had Olympic athletes and then teachers, and then we kind of bounce ideas off each other. And when you said that about being a coach, like you're not your niche, you're not your thing, it's like I had to have like almost like park my ego a bit. I'm like, these 13-year-old kids, if we were to race, they'd smoke me. And it's like, right, but that's not my job.
Yeah.
Like my job is to help develop them, and in that sort of environment. So that's when you said that just sparked in my head, maybe shelving the ego a little bit and thinking like, what is your role here in this environment? But no, that's awesome. Yeah, mate. Well, I've kept you for this long, so I appreciate your time. And yeah, that was wicked. There's tons in there. I've made loads of notes. There's tons in there that hopefully people can listen to this once or twice or more than that and take everything from it.